I'm sorry, Marcus, but the HOA rules are clear. You can't fish here.
Well, but this is public property.
The morning the lake turned white, people thought it was fog at first, a thin, milky film stretching across the water like spilled glass. But by noon, the fish had started floating to the surface. Dozens of them, mouths open and gills pale. Kids who came to feed the ducks screamed when they saw them. One man said the air tasted like bleach. That was the first sign something was wrong in Cypress Glen. At the far end of the neighborhood, Terran Blake stood on his back porch, coffee in hand, watching the lake he'd fished from nearly every weekend since he moved in. He thought maybe someone dumped paint or fertilizer. But when his dog Scout ran to the edge and started licking the water, Terran noticed the smell-sharp chemical. Wrong. Hey, don't drink that, he yelled, but Scout had already taken a few laps. Within hours, the dog was vomiting in the yard. Terran rushed him to the emergency vet in nearby College Station, where the vet shook her head. Looks like he got into something toxic, maybe antifreeze or pesticide. Terran's stomach dropped. It came from the lake behind my house, he said. The vet's expression hardened. Then you need to call environmental services. That's not normal. By that evening, yellow police tape wrapped around the walking trail, and a white county pickup was parked near the dock. Residents gathered in clusters, whispering theories: an accident, runoff, something in the pipes. No one looked at Terran, though most knew he fished there often. But deep down, he already suspected who was behind it. 2 weeks earlier, he'd received another email from Evelyn Strafford, the HOA president. The subject line read, "Unauthorized use of shared property." She claimed fishing wasn't permitted in the community lake, citing a bylaw that hadn't been enforced in years. Terran had replied politely, explaining that the rules only banned commercial fishing. Evelyn never responded. She just sent a $150 fine. Now, as Terran stood by the taped-off path, he saw her striding toward the lake in beige slacks and a crisp visor. "Mr. Blake," she called, voice sweet but hollow. "I hope you're not thinking of going near that water. The HOA treated it for algae this morning." Terran's eyes narrowed. "Treated with what?" She waved dismissively. "Standard chemicals. Perfectly safe. It'll clear up soon." Terran looked at the pale film floating on the water. "Safe. My dog's at the vet right now because of that treatment." Her smile didn't falter. "Maybe keep your dog away from restricted areas, Mr. Blake." Then she turned away, pretending he wasn't there. That was the moment something broke inside him that night. Terran sat at his kitchen table, searching lake chemical algae treatment toxicity. He found warnings about copper sulfate and dicot, both banned for residential lakes. One line made his blood run cold. Can leach into groundwater and affect drinking water sources. The next morning he filled a glass straight from the tap. It looked fine, clean, but as he raised it to his lips, a sick thought stuck in his mind. What if it isn't? Across the street, neighbors were already complaining: kids with stomach cramps, tap water that smelled like chlorine. Evelyn stood outside, assuring board members everything was under control. But Scout was still at the vet, hooked to IV. That was proof enough. That evening, Terran walked back to the lake. The air was still, the water lifeless. He bent down, picked up a fish. It crumbled in his hand. "This isn't over," he whispered. Behind him, a voice answered quietly, "It shouldn't have happened." He turned to see Ruth Ann Marlowe, his neighbor 2 doors down, who worked for the county's environmental office. "You know something about this?" he asked. She hesitated, glancing toward Evelyn's house. "Not here. Come by my place tomorrow. You'll want to see what I found." Terran watched her disappear under the streetlights, unease crawling in his chest. He didn't know what she had. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just about a poisoned lake anymore. Before everything went wrong, Terran Blake was the kind of man who kept to himself. He worked long shifts as a warehouse supervisor just outside Bryan, Texas. Hard, honest work that left you tired but proud. Every evening he'd drive home in his old Ford pickup, park under the pecan tree, and unwind by the lake. He'd saved nearly a decade to buy that house: 3 bedrooms, a screened porch, and a small deck that faced the water. That view meant everything. Fishing reminded him of time with his grandfather on the Brazos River. It was peace. He didn't care for HOA meetings or pot. He paid his dues, waved politely, and stayed out of trouble. That was his rhythm until Evelyn Strafford arrived. Retired early from banking in Dallas, she took over the HOA like a queen seizing her throne. Her silver hair was always tied in a bun, her lawn trimmed like velvet, her voice sharp as a verdict. From the start, she disliked Terran. Maybe it was the old truck, maybe the work boots. The first time they spoke, she said he parked too close to the curb. The second, she scolded him for leaving his fishing gear visible. "You know it's a lake neighborhood, right?" he'd joked. "There are rules, Mr. Blake," she'd replied coldly. After that, he'd see her blinds twitch whenever he stepped outside. Then came the fines: $50 for visible equipment, $100 for an unapproved modification when he built a small bench by the dock. "Feels like she's allergic to peace," Terran joked to his friend Devin at work. "I breathe wrong, and she's got a form for it." Devin laughed. "Those HOA types have power, man, careful." But Terran loved that lake too much to stop. He kept it clean, helped kids reel in fish, and tried to ignore the whispers, until one night, his fishing line was cut clean through. He started locking up his tackle box. Later, he saw Evelyn laughing with two men near the notice board. They looked his way and smirked. That laughter hit harder than any fine. Sitting by the window that night, Terran whispered to Scout, "We didn't do anything wrong." But the next HOA newsletter proved him wrong. Fishing in Community Lake prohibited without written HOA approval, the same rule that had sat ignored for years. The next morning, Evelyn showed up on his porch with a copy. "Just making sure you received the update," she said. Terran stared at her. "You rewrote the rules because of me." "I enforced them," she snapped. "There's a difference." When he asked why she was doing this, she replied, "It's about maintaining the character of our community." Terran almost laughed. "You poisoned at the moment you brought hate into it." For a second, she faltered, then said coldly, "Watch yourself, Mr. Blake. Attitude doesn't go unnoticed. Trouble has a way of finding people who don't look for it tanned soon." Everyone could feel the tension. One Saturday morning, Terran was cleaning his grill when Evelyn pulled up in her Lexus. "We've had complaints about loud noise from your property," she said. "Noise? I was watching baseball alone," he replied. "Well, someone found it disruptive. This community values quiet." Terran sighed. "You can't just make up rules whenever you feel like it." "You're welcome to attend the next HOA meeting," she said, tight-lipped. "Oh, I'll be there," he muttered. "Might even bring my fishing rod as a prop." Her glare could have cut glass. "Don't test me, Mr. Blake." When he arrived at that meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Evelyn stood at the front, commanding the room. "As you all know," she began, "we've had ongoing issues with non-compliance regarding the lake." Murmurs rippled. Terran raised his hand. "Can I speak?" She gave him 3 minutes. "I moved here for peace," he said. "I fish because it helps me unwind. I followed the rules, the old rules. The new ones were written just to punish me." Whispers filled the room. One neighbor spoke up. "He's right. People fished there for years." Evelyn forced a smile. "We're maintaining standards." "No," another said. "We want fairness." Her expression cracked. The meeting ended with divided faces, some avoiding Terran, others nodding in quiet support. Ruth Ann approached afterward, warning softly, "Evelyn doesn't like losing control. Be careful." Days later, Terran's garbage cans were knocked over. A note appeared under his door. "Find another place to fish." And one morning someone had spray-painted private property on the dock. He took photos and marched to the HOA office. Evelyn looked up from her desk, feigning shock. "My goodness," she said. "Subscribe to Drama Lady Files." She stared at the photos, her tone smooth but cold. "That's terrible, Mr. Blake," she said. "But I don't see how this concerns the HOA." "It concerns you," Terran shot back, voice tight with anger, "because whoever did this is part of the community you're always bragging about." Evelyn folded her hands neatly on her desk. "If you're implying I had something to do with this," she said sharply, "you should be careful with your accusations." "I'm not implying," Terran replied quietly. "I'm saying you let it happen." For the first time, Evelyn's eyes flickered, her calm mask cracking for just a second before she straightened her jacket. "This conversation is over," she said, dismissing him like a nuisance. Terran walked out, a heavy realization sinking in. He wasn't dealing with a rule enforcer. He was dealing with someone who loved power far too much to ever let go. Over the next week, the tension became impossible to ignore. Neighbors avoided his gaze, offering awkward smiles or whispered apologies, only when Evelyn wasn't around. Others treated him like the problem. One evening, while fixing a garden hose, Ruth Ann approached quietly. "You might want to stay alert," she warned. "I heard from someone on the board they're planning a lake treatment. Evelyn's idea. Says it's for algae control." Terran frowned. "What kind of treatment?" "She didn't say," Ruth Ann answered, "but she pushed it through without environmental clearance. I asked for documentation. She shut me out." Terran looked toward the calm, gleaming water. "That lake's fine. There's no algae." "I know," Ruth Ann said. "That's what scares me." Neither of them realized that what the HOA called a treatment would soon turn into something much worse, something that would poison more than just the water. By early summer, Cypress Glen didn't feel the same. The friendly waves and porch hellos had vanished, replaced by tight smiles and silent judgment. Every time Terran stepped outside, he could feel eyes on him. Doors shut when he walked by. Conversations stopped mid. At first he tried to shrug it off, convincing himself it was paranoia, but then the signs became undeniable. One morning, his mailbox disappeared, bolts still in the ground, but the box gone. A week later, someone dumped fish guts near his trash cans. Days after that, they smeared the same filth across his driveway. He filed a report with the sheriff's office, but the deputy barely looked up. "Sounds like a neighbor dispute," he muttered. "Try to keep the peace." Terran leaned forward, disbelief burning in his voice. "So they can vandalize my property, and you're telling me to keep the peace?" "We'll log it," the deputy sighed. "But without witnesses or footage, there's not much we can do." That night, Terran installed 2 cameras, one aimed at his driveway, the other at the lake. If someone wanted to mess with him again, he'd be ready. A few evenings later, he was sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee when he saw Evelyn approaching. Dressed in her signature beige slacks and visor, she stopped at his gate, all fake politeness. "Good evening, Mr. Blake. I couldn't help but notice those cameras." "Yeah," he said slowly. "They're to protect my property." Her smile tightened. "You do realize exterior surveillance requires HOA approval, correct?" He blinked. "You're kidding." "Not at all," she replied smoothly. "Visible equipment must be reviewed by the board to ensure neighborhood aesthetics." Terran laughed bitterly. "You mean the same board that ignores vandalism and threats against me?" Evelyn crossed her arms. "If you're suggesting that HOA condones harassment, I find that offensive." "You know what I find offensive?" he said, standing up. "Being treated like I don't belong here just because I don't fit your perfect picture." "This isn't about belonging," she said flatly. "It's about compliance." He stepped closer, voice steady but sharp. "Then maybe start with environmental compliance. Heard you've got some kind of lake treatment coming up." That wiped the smirk from her face. "You shouldn't believe everything you hear, Mr. Blake. The HOA knows what it's doing." "Sure it does," he muttered, "especially when it wants to get rid of people." Evelyn turned and walked away, heels striking the pavement like a warning. Terran's pulse pounded as he sat back down. Scout lay quietly by his feet, watching his owner in silence. The next morning, the cameras caught movement at dawn, two people wearing gloves and caps, dumping liquid from large containers into the lake. Under the flashlight glare, Terran spotted a word on one of the labels. "Toxic." He called Ruth Ann immediately. She rushed over, still in her county uniform. When she saw the footage, her face drained of color. "That's industrial-grade packaging," she whispered. "That's not algae treatment." "Can you trace it?" Terran asked. "If they didn't file documentation, it'll be hard," she said. "But I'll check local purchase logs." "Do it," he said. "I will." She nodded. "But be careful, Terran. If the HOA finds out you have this footage, they'll come after you." He gave a tired smile. "They already are." The next few days felt like waiting for a storm. The air was heavy, neighbors tense. Then came the bright orange "Do Not Enter" signs around the lake. Water treatment in progress. Evelyn stood proudly beside them with a clipboard, directing workers like she was running a construction crew. Terran approached. "You sure it's safe for them to handle that stuff without gloves?" "This doesn't concern you, Mr. Blake," she said coldly. "It does when you're poisoning the lake I live next to." "You're harassing workers now," she snapped. "Leave before I report you." He stared at her. "You'll regret this, Evelyn." "Not as much as you will," she replied, walking away. That night, Ruth Ann called, her voice shaking. "I found it. They bought 30 gallons of copper sulfate blend, the industrial-grade kind. It's banned for residential use. And they didn't file a permit. They used a fake contractor name." Terran's stomach dropped. He looked out at the lake glowing faintly under the moonlight, a ghostly film spreading across its surface. Within days, Cypress Glen started to change. The air smelled metallic. Pets refused to drink water. Kids got sick. The HOA sent cheerful emails calling it routine maintenance. But by Tuesday, the lake had turned milky green and lifeless. Dead fish lined the shore. When Ruth Ann confronted Evelyn with the truth that the contractor didn't exist and the chemicals were illegal, Evelyn just crossed her arms. "This isn't your jurisdiction," she said. "No," Ruth Ann replied. "But public health is." Terran stepped forward. "You didn't just take a risk. You took ours, our homes, our kids, our lives." Evelyn glared. "Maybe if you hadn't made yourself such a nuisance, none of this would have been necessary." The breeze carried the smell of chemicals as Terran whispered, "You did this because of me." "Believe what you want," Evelyn said, turning away. But by the next day, people were getting sick. Children first, then adults. Stomach pain, rashes, dizziness. The county sent inspectors. News vans followed. The once perfect Cypress Glen became a toxic headline, the poisoned lake community. And all because one man refused to back down. Subscribe to Drama Lady Files. Even after everything that had happened, Evelyn still refused to admit guilt. She sent out another HOA email titled "A Temporary Setback," blaming a faulty contractor and assuring residents that the situation was under control. But by then, everyone knew she was lying. That evening, Ruth Ann showed up at Terran's house, exhaustion written across her face. She dropped a manila folder onto his kitchen table and said, "They tested the samples. The main compound is copper sulfate, but there's another agent, benzalkonium chloride. It's used in industrial disinfectants, not approved for open water." Terran flipped through the county lab reports, his stomach sinking. "So what does that mean?" he asked. Ruth Ann's voice was quiet. "It means they didn't just overtreat the lake, they poisoned it." He rubbed his temples, realizing the horror of it. "And we're all drinking from that same supply," he muttered. She nodded grimly. "Every house in this neighborhood uses that groundwater. The contamination levels are way above what's safe." Terran pushed his chair back, anger burning in his chest. "She did this because she wanted me gone," he said. "All that talk about algae, she just wanted to prove a point." Ruth Ann's eyes softened. "She didn't just hurt you, she hurt everyone." He paced the kitchen. "So what now? The county knows. The news is out. What else can we do? Ruth Ann hesitated. I have copies of the invoices, she said. The chemical order was placed using the HOA account. I can prove Evelyn signed off on it. Terran froze. You're sure? Positive. I printed them this morning before she tries to erase anything. Terran stared at the folder, understanding the risk she'd taken. You could lose your job. Ruth Ann shrugged. Sometimes doing the right thing costs something. They sat in silence. Scout's soft breathing filling the room. If we take this public, Terran said finally, she's finished. Ruth Ann met his gaze. That's exactly why she'll come for you. The next morning proved her right. Terran woke to find his front yard littered with flyers stamped in bold red letters. HOA violator under investigation, do not engage. Evelyn had plastered his name across every board in the neighborhood, accusing him of spreading lies and harassing members. Furious, Terran stormed toward the clubhouse where Evelyn stood pretending to supervise cleanup crews. You've gone too far, he snapped, shoving the flyer toward her. Without looking up, she smiled coldly. Public information. Mr. Blake, the board approved it. You forged a contractor's name. You poisoned a lake. You think a piece of paper scares me? Evelyn finally looked at him, her eyes sharp and icy. You don't belong here, she said. You've been a problem since you arrived. I just wanted a neighborhood that respected itself. Terran's voice cracked. Respect? You don't even respect life. Neighbors began gathering, phones out, whispering. For the first time, Evelyn looked uncertain. You should leave, she said quietly. Terran didn't move. You've hidden behind your rules long enough. People are sick, kids are in hospitals, and you're still pretending you're saving property values. The crowd murmured as Ruth Ann stepped forward, holding the folder high. We have proof, she declared. Signed invoices, no permits, no contractor. The HOA paid for illegal chemicals using community funds. Evelyn's confidence broke. You can't just then explain your signature, Ruth Ann interrupted. Silence fell. Faces that once looked to Evelyn for leadership now glared in anger and betrayal. You poisoned the people you were supposed to protect, Terran said quietly. Evelyn backed away, trembling. I didn't know it would go this far. You knew enough to fake documents, Ruth Ann replied. Evelyn turned and walked off quickly, heels clattering against the pavement. No one followed. That night, Terran couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the moonlight shimmer faintly over the poisoned lake. Something once peaceful had been turned deadly by human pride. Around midnight, Ruth Ann called. The county's launching a formal investigation, she said. Environmental officers will be here tomorrow. This isn't just about fines anymore, it's criminal. Terran exhaled. Good. It's time someone took responsibility. Ruth Ann hesitated. It might get messy. It's already messy, he said. Now it's time for truth. But Evelyn wasn't finished. The next morning, 3 state vehicles pulled into Cypress Glen, investigators marking off restricted zones with red tape. For once, Terran wasn't the one under scrutiny. Evelyn's house now had inspectors parked outside. She tried to close her blinds, but everyone knew she was home. Ruth Ann arrived, holding a binder. They're pulling every HOA record from the last 6 months, she said. Emails, invoices. If there's tampering, she's done. You think she'd cooperate? Terran asked. Not willingly, Ruth Ann replied. But there's enough for a subpoena. Moments later, Evelyn emerged, still poised but visibly unraveling. I hope you're proud, she hissed. You've turned this community into a circus. Terran's reply was calm but firm. You did that yourself. She snapped. You think any of this helps property values? The news trucks, the tape, it's humiliating. Ruth Ann crossed her arms. You should have thought of that before buying industrial chemicals online. Evelyn glared. You're making a mistake, funny, Terran said. So did you. That afternoon, Agent Clark Sorrell from the Environmental Crimes Division knocked on Terran's door. We've confirmed contamination exceeding state limits, he said. Whoever authorized this could face criminal charges. Terran led him to his computer and showed footage from his security camera shadows dumping barrels into the lake. Sorrell leaned closer. This helps. Timestamps match delivery records. Ruth Ann soon arrived, handing him more documents, proof of Evelyn's approval. Sorrell nodded. We'll obtain a warrant and press charges for environmental tampering, fraud, and misuse of funds. Will you testify? Absolutely, Terran said. Ruth Ann nodded. Count me in. By evening, the entire neighborhood buzzed with talk of arrests. Some were angry, others ashamed. The next morning, state officers returned with paperwork. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as Evelyn was escorted outside, not in handcuffs, but with her reputation destroyed. This is harassment, she shouted. Agent Sorrell replied evenly. Procedure doesn't involve dumping poison into public water. Terran stood silently by his yard, watching the woman who had tried to ruin him finally be held accountable. Later that day, Ruth Ann stopped by again. They're taking her in for questioning, she said. The treasurer turned over all the internal emails. There's no way out now. Terran sighed. I should feel better, but all I can think about is that water. It'll take months to clean, Ruth Ann said softly. Justice never looks as clean as we want it to. Over the coming weeks, Cypress Glen transformed into a cleanup site, yellow tape fluttering in the wind, trucks hauling contaminated soil. and parents holding protest signs that read "Our kids deserve clean water." Evelyn's name became national news. Terran, once called a troublemaker, was now the man who exposed the HOA. Still, the victory felt hollow. "People believe what's comfortable," he told Ruth Ann. "Turns out we mistook silence for peace." When the county finally declared the lake safe months later, Terran brought his fishing rod to the dock. The water was calm again, the air clean. He cast his line, feeling something he hadn't in a long time: peace. Not the kind that hides the truth, but the kind that comes after surviving it. The ripples spread gently across the restored water, carrying the quiet promise of renewal. Subscribe to Drama Lady Files.